Hello there. This is a video lecture on new product development, which is part of Module 7 and is associated with Chapter 8 in the textbook. New product development is actually a very exciting area to be involved with in to create a new product. I've been on the ground floor of a few products, and it is truly an exciting time. It's actually quite rewarding to see a product actually go from initial inception to actually being on the market, fully commercialized. Anyway, when we look at products, we have to look at their core benefit. What is the core benefit that that product is going to deliver? And for most products, it's fairly obvious. A car is for transportation, and other computer is for, well, it may have many core benefits. And to deliver that core benefit, you have to build the actual product, which consists of things like the brand name, features that you'll imbue it with, the packaging that you'll put it inside, the design of the product itself, as well as the quality level that you'll put into it. And there's lots of considerations when doing that. Are you trying to design a durable product or one that will be disposable? Do you want to have it a high quality level or a low? In some cases, the packaging is almost the reason for buying the product. So, and we talk, of course, about the features, and we'll talk a little bit more about the brand name at a later date. Anyway, we have our actual product, but in addition to the actual product, we also have something called the augmented product. And these are things that we add on to the actual product. Mostly services in terms of delivery or providing credit, allowing people to use a product while not having fully paid for it. Maybe it's a matter of installation. Some products are very difficult for lay people to install. So maybe you'll have as part of the purchase, you'll provide installation, other associated services like tech support and so forth. Or maybe it's warranties to make the customer feel comfortable about the product. So these all have a cost, and you have to consider, how important to the actual product are these various aspects of the augmented product. And these are discussions that you will have in the product development phase. And there are all sorts of types of products. First, we'll start with consumer products. We have what are called convenience products. And even within convenience products, there are various categories. These are essentially non-durable goods that are purchased frequently with not a lot of comparison. We don't, these are often a result of habitual buying behavior. And they fall into different categories. As I said, staples. Staples are things that you buy every day on an ongoing basis. You don't, again, the habitual buying behaviors, things like bread and milk and butter and anything else that you might frequently purchase. Then we also have impulse products. These are products that are absolutely not necessary in any way, but people will, and there's not a lot of complex buying behavior here. And these are things like maybe gum or candy or magazines. These are things that they actually put near the cash register because they know if they don't put them at the cash register, they will maybe not be purchased. They're not necessary in any way, but people will buy them on an impulse. And I have to admit myself, maybe I'm at the store getting something else and I see a candy bar, which will elicit a hunger response in me. Not even at the supermarket. If you notice, there are other types of stores like Staples or a Home Depot that do the exact same thing. It's a little extra revenue based on impulse buys. And then, of course, there are emergency products. These are things in which we need to get it quickly because of some sort of an emergency. I don't necessarily mean it's a life and death emergency, but um, you just need them. You cut your finger and you need a Band-Aid. You don't go searching for what the best price on Band-Aids is. I remember years ago, my son was having an allergic reaction to something. It wasn't life and death, but I need to get him some medication. I believe it was Benadryl. And I know, I probably paid more than I would otherwise, but it was an urgent situation. And that's what we mean by an emergency situation. Probably urgent is a better word. And for these, we probably don't pay the lowest price. Well, maybe with Staples we do, but certainly impulse buys and emergency purchases are not usually, there's not a lot of review of the price in those situations. Then, of course, there are what are the textbook calls shopping products, and these are products in which we spend some time and effort gathering information on. These would be things like appliances, whether it's a computer or a washing machine or a car. We'll exert some complex buying behaviors here because of they're infrequently purchased or they're expensive or there's some other aspect that requires more attention than an impulse buy, for instance. We also have specialty products, and these are products with unique characteristics that are attractive at any price. When I say any price, I mean relatively any price. Jewelry would be an example of this. Maybe there are other products where, let's say maybe video game systems. I'm not a user of video game systems, at least not very often. So that might be a specialty product in which you might be willing to spend more than the usual amount of money. And then there are what are called unsought products, which may seem a little odd. And these are products which the consumer has very little awareness or interest, and you're not usually in the market for them. It might be, well, maybe funeral services. You don't really want to buy funeral services, but you often have to. And in the textbook, there'll be some further discussion about unsought products. We also have various types of business products. Organizations, as we may have discussed previously, have to buy lots of products. One type would be equipment. It could be production equipment, or it could be manufacturing equipment such as maybe a lathe or drill or other types of maybe robotic computer equipment for a high-end manufacturing operation. Certainly office equipment, computers, furniture, that sort of thing, printers. Also various maintenance and repair services. If you're operating a large manufacturing operation, you better make sure that your equipment is maintained, and if not maintained, it certainly needs to be repaired from time to time. Raw materials, and these are materials which are not processed in any way. Raw ore or wood, logs, things like that, that would require some and processing before they can be used in any way. And there are occasionally differences of opinion exactly what a raw material is. Would logs that have been sliced up to be put in a furnace be considered a raw material? Maybe not. But certainly metal ore and other types of materials like that. However, some may be processed, or and there's different levels of processing. Maybe that wood has been at the mill and cut into boards, so it's been somewhat processed. Steel. Usually you don't get well, steel is a manufactured product anyway. It's not a naturally occurring metal. It's actually technically steel is an alloy, And so that would be another processed material. And of course, there are different levels of, you know, of these types of processed materials. For steel, for instance, there's different types of steel. I'm not an expert in this area, but I know that, for instance, somebody at one point made a recommendation that we have some steel from a particular country, a particular company, a particular country, and they said no, they're no good. They're not very good at making surgical steel. And I don't know the difference between regular steel and surgical steel, but apparently it is a higher grade. And so you have to be very careful about processed materials, that it does have some specifications that you are requiring. Component parts, and I may have spoken previously about ingredients versus components. Well, here we're definitely talking about finished components that would be put into another product. I think I may have previously given the example of computer chips put into computers. So you will buy components from which you will build a better or a larger product. There, of course, are special services. Some examples would be like market research or legal services, or any other special services that you might require. So businesses are actually very big buyers of both goods and services, and most of my my clients essentially are business to business companies, and my services, my marketing services, fall under special services. So there are various stages in new product development. The first stage is idea generation, and ideas can come from all sorts of places. And usually, if we're in class, in a physical classroom together, I usually try to do a brainstorming session. Ideas can come from customers. Maybe it's a customer complaint. Why doesn't this product do X? So maybe you need to have a product that does X, whatever that is. When you're trying to come up with products, brainstorming sessions are great. I love working in brainstorming sessions where people come up with ideas. And here's one of the key things for a brainstorming session is that people have to come up, should be allowed to come up with ideas, even stupid ideas. Imagine you're in a room with a blackboard or a whiteboard, and somebody's just writing every idea that anyone throws out there. Even bad ideas can be useful. I remember one time I was in a brainstorming session and I was getting a little tired, and I just started making jokes, and somebody put one of my jokes on the board. Turns out that's what we ended up doing. It was for an advertising project, and I was just being a little bit silly, but apparently it appealed to people. And even an idea that is on its own completely worthless actually may have value in that it may trigger an idea in somebody else, maybe going in a direction one might not have expected. Often when you're trying to solve a problem, people tend to go to the tried and true methods, things that have worked for them in the past, and don't think in other directions. And it's worth engaging in this type of thing. Now, the one thing you cannot do, you cannot tell anyone. You have to tell everyone, don't say that's a stupid idea. Because if somebody says that's a stupid idea, if they're going to be judged, other people are going to just withdraw and not say anything that might be judged stupid. So you want to foster a trusting atmosphere where everyone can be free to throw out ideas no matter how ridiculous. And that might get people thinking in a different direction. And the more ideas you have, the more possible solutions, the better product or idea that you're going to come up with in the end. Okay, you've generated a wide range of ideas. Oh, I'm sorry. Another source of ideas is serendipity. Just things that you want to be open to, things that happen by accident. There's a story from 3M. If you're not familiar with 3M, they make Scotch tape. They make a lot of it. One of their big areas is adhesives. And somebody had made a batch of adhesive that wasn't very sticky at all. I mean, it was a little bit sticky, but not sticky enough. I don't know what there's a stickiness scale, but I'm not familiar with it. Apparently, a secretary said, "Well, can I have some of that?" I said, "Sure. I know what you're going to do with it." What she did was she took little pieces of paper, little piece of paper, and just put some on the back and put it up on a wall. She was trying to organize some ideas, and she accidentally invented the Post-it note. The idea of something that is just a little bit sticky that I can, stick on something. I don't want it too sticky. I don't want to rip the paint off the wall, but I will often do this. I'm trying to work out an idea. I will put a bunch of ideas on a Post-it note and put them on a wall or a board, which is great for brainstorming. Back to brainstorming. So there are all sorts of ideas. You should never close down an idea based on its source. Okay. All right. Now you've gathered up all these great ideas. Then eventually you have, again, they're not all great, but you have to start screening them out. You can't use all those ideas. Some of those ideas were there to trigger other ideas. Okay, those you probably get rid of. The stupid ones, the unfeasible ones, that's fine. And eventually you get down to a few ideas that you might want to take forward. And then you start with your market development strategy, you start thinking about the more specific things that you need to do. Maybe you do a little prototyping. Prototyping is making up a sample version of the product. I actually had a friend who worked in prototyping, and he said, we have two types of prototypes. We have the looks like prototype and then a works like prototype. So let's say you've come up with an idea for a new type of fire extinguisher. You could have a looks like prototype that looks like the fire extinguisher but doesn't function. And then works like would be an actual fire extinguisher, not a production model, but something made up to test the design. So then you also have to do a certain business analysis, and this is where you get into some number crunching, looking at the target market, and maybe you've done some of this along the way. None of these steps have to be completely linear. You can start thinking about business analysis at an earlier stage, but you might you're going to look at production costs, you're going to look at materials, you're going to look at market share. Is there really a market for this product? How is that going to affect the market share of your other products, and so forth? So, then this is where, again, you really have to do some serious number crunching. And hopefully you come up with a product that is even more profitable than your current offerings, or maybe it fills a certain niche that's being underserved. Again, this gets into, this is all about the analysis, and again, a lot of it has to do with numbers. At some point, obviously, if you're going to go ahead, you have to do technical product development, and this is where a lot of manufacturing engineers might get involved, saying, "Oh yeah, you've got this idea for this product, but how will it fit into our manufacturing operations? Can we make it cheaper? Can we use alternate materials?" You want to get your manufacturing costs as low as possible, and this is where that would occur. And once you've done that, you probably want to do some test marketing. And I think I have mentioned previously that McDonald's, for instance, does a lot of test marketing. For instance, they test marketed the McGriddle sandwiches in Houston many years ago, and it was only available in the Houston area, and then it was successful, so they expanded it nationwide. And so test marketing may take various forms depending upon your product. But once you're successful, then you can go to full commercialization, full production, full distribution. You're essentially on the market now. You have launched. How long does this process take? Well, it can vary quite a lot. For some products, it can be a very short amount of time. It could be a couple months. Um, for most products, it's a bit longer. On the far end, the pharmaceutical industry, um, mainly because there's so much testing that has to go on, it may take 12 to 15 years. That's very unusual because obviously you're dealing with a lot of safety issues, people's health, but that's an exciting thing to work on, getting launched. Anyway, once you actually have decided to launch, you have to get people to adopt your new product. Now, I'm not talking about line extensions here. What I mean, like for instance, let's see, here I have diet green tea citrus. Now, let's say I work for the Lipton company. I said, well, a lot of people like the taste of lime, so maybe we'll do a diet green tea lime. Well, that's just a new flavor. It's not really a new product. It's just a line extension. So I'm not talking about line extensions. I'm talking about a completely new product. This particularly applies to technological products, and people will adopt at different rates. What you see on the screen now is what's called a normal distribution curve. If you've taken a course in statistics, it will be very familiar to you. If you take any group of things, let's say, let's give an example, men's shoe size. You're going to see, I believe the average men's shoe size is a 10, size 10. So let's see here, in the middle, the average, the mean average is going to be size 10. And that's the one you're going to sell the most shoes, the most units on. And as you get smaller, 9.5, 9, 8, 7, you're going to sell fewer. And at the as you go up, it's the size 11, size 12, size 13. I actually knew somebody who had a size 17 foot. There are not a lot of people with size 17 feet, and so they would be there. So we're going to apply that this normal distribution curve to how quickly people adopt a new product. And we've set certain stages. The first stage, which is only 2.5% of the population, are what we call the innovators. Now, I'm not actually that fond of this label, because I don't think of them as innovators. These are the people who, ooh, it's a new product, I have to buy it. That's their response to things. And I actually had some friends who were that way. In fact, these two friends named Fred and Don, they were always competing with each other. Who could get the newest, coolest thing? And they were innovators. They were this 2.5% of the population. They just wanted things because they were new. And while we love, people who, we're going to buy our products like that, that's great. But we're far more interested in this next group, which we call the early adopters. And you may have heard this term before. They're not actually the first group to buy, but they're the second group to buy. And these are people who evaluate quickly. They develop, and we've talked about, the buying process, how, people become aware of products, they develop an interest, they evaluate, and then eventually they make a decision. These people go through it very quickly. They're not buying it because it's new. They're buying it because they've evaluated it and they really like it. And in some cases, in some products, unfortunately, this is where the story ends. There are maybe certain enthusiasts who love a certain product, if it's a niche product, and it stops here. And actually, there's a book about this, and this point is also, this one gentleman wrote a book called The Chasm, and it's about how certain products stop here. However, we'll assume that we have a successful product, and most products will go. He was really talking about products that were very innovative, that were very new and different, and we'll talk more about that. So once these, and again, this is 13.5% of the population, certainly much more substantial than the 2.5% that the innovators represent. But there's one particular quality that we really like about these people. It's not simply their speed of adoption, but we also like the fact that they become opinion leaders. And that's a very important point. The early adopters become opinion leaders. And the next group, the following groups, for instance, the early majority, they will consult the early adopters. In fact, maybe in your circle of acquaintances, maybe in your family, you have somebody who adopts things very quickly, often technology, but not necessarily. I know someone actually who is always quickly adopts or evaluates the new dietary offerings, different health drinks and things like that. I know somebody else who's very quick to adopt very quickly to adopt technology. And well, we're going to go by, and particularly in the area of entertainment systems. And people in our family will consult him before they buy because he's an early adopter and therefore he becomes an opinion leader. And in your market, you would want to identify the early adopters, those opinion leaders, those people who will influence others, and target those people in a positive way to get them to adopt your product and reinforce your message out to the early adopters. The early adopters are people who are not, I don't mean they're slow to adopt, but they want to make sure that somebody else has tested it. And that's why, again, the early adopters are so important. The next group is the late majority. The late majority wants to make sure a lot of people have tested. They're very conservative. They're not quick to jump at things, but once they see a whole bunch of people have adopted this, okay, yeah, I'll get on board. The last group are the laggards. The last 16%. They are slow to change. If any of you have watched the television show The Ranch, Bo Bennett would be a laggard. He doesn't like change. He doesn't like, to get new things. Actually, and often the reason they eventually get on board is because whatever their current solution is no longer available. For example, another set of laggards would be my parents. They finally adopted a CD player, but it's only after they couldn't get their 8-track tape player fixed. It's that sort of thing. So they are the last to the market, the last to buy in, and however, sometimes there are opportunities even with laggards. An example of this would be the LP record, the vinyl records. I have to admit, I have a collection of vinyl records, and a lot of other people do, and I have a turntable, but I don't really. I've adopted other things, downloadable music, and before that, CD-ROMs. But a lot of people have these, and actually, it's interesting. A lot of people have these LP records, and actually, they've kind of had a new life. It's a niche market now, but somebody discovered that a lot of people have these records and value them. So they came up with a new type of turntable. It's traditional turntable, but with superior electronics technology. And it has breathed new life to this market. And so in an unusual sense, the laggards have become the early adopters for this particular technology, because they don't have to change very much. It's actually bringing something old back, only better. So you want to consider that. I mean, people who are early adopters in one area are not necessarily going to be early adopters in other areas. So again, it depends upon your product, depends upon your market. There are various factors that will affect the adoption rate, how quickly people come on board. First is, what is the relative advantage compared to other products? If it has no real advantage, it's not likely to be adopted. And how observable is that difference? For instance, years ago, I'm sure many of you are familiar with VHS tape. There was another tape system called Betamax, which was better than VHS. However, the difference was not that observable. People were not as good at observing video quality. So it was technically better, but the difference was not very observable. Um, and you could say that, about a lot of products that are, like for instance, if there's a new type of vitamin, people would have to take it on faith. It's not actually that, it might not be that observable. So, there has to be a significant difference, and that difference has to be visible. Is it compatible with your lifestyle, of the lifestyle of the consumer? One reason that CD-ROM players were very successful was that you could plug them into the same jacks, and people used to have these big stereo systems. You could plug them into the same jack that you had plugged your turntable into, your LP turntable. So it was very easy to adopt it. You didn't have to learn any new technology. Also, how complex is it? If something requires a lot of education on the part of the consumer, it's less likely to be adopted. The easier it is, the simpler it is, the more likely it is to be adopted. So this is why, again, for some people, they're still not quite ready to adopt smartphones, because to somebody who's very used to a flip phone that's very simple, even though there are all sorts of advantages of a smartphone over a flip phone, people are, the complexity overwhelms them. Actually, my father doesn't have a cell phone at all, and he's getting to an age we want him to have a cell phone. We want to be able to get a hold of him. We want him to get a hold of us. And my sister was saying, well, we'll just get him a smartphone. I said, no, we can't get him a smartphone. He won't. That's not a good first phone for him. So we're going to get him a flip phone, and that's the way it goes. And also, is it trialable? Can you can you try it? So, is it something you can test? And this is why companies provide test drives, for cars. It has to be testable, trialable. And if it's, if it requires a major purchase, significant amount of money, and there's no way to try it beforehand, people are not going to adopt it. People are not going to take that chance. Okay, if you have any questions, please send me a text or send me an email. Please read the textbook and do any simulations that are due. Take care.